Hello and welcome to Identirati Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue. Today is episode 204. And before we get started, a quick reminder to please follow IOH on LinkedIn or YouTube. Our topic today is the OAuth Client Challenge Protocol. Our guest today is Judith Carr. Welcome, Judith.
Hello, thank you.
And I'm sorry, I forgot to give your full title. So Judith is an identity specialist at Curity. One of the best identity teams on the planet, I think. And today's topic's a little geeky, so.
Thank you. It flatters me. Yeah, officially my title is a product marketing engineer, but yeah, I'm an identity specialist, and I've been working with identity for basically my whole career. So I started as a developer for a PKI product, like a CA management software. Did a short excursion as a security engineer. Didn't turn out very well, but that was actually when I met the Curity founders for the first time. And they eventually, some year later, convinced me to join them. So I have been with Curity for about 6 years now, working with technical documents on the website. So if you look at the website and you see some OAuth related stuff, that's probably from me and my colleagues.
Cool. So we're going to dive into the topic today called the OAuth Client Challenge Protocol. So I noticed this. I read the OAuth mailing list, and I saw this conversation come up, and I was interested in it. It reminds me a little bit of the authorization challenge protocol, which was introduced as a back channel sort of authentication mechanism. But maybe before we sort of dive into the details, you can just tell us, like, what problem were you looking to solve with this particular protocol?
Yeah, as part of my role, I do a lot of exploring. So I try to find ways how the product, Curity's identity server, fits into the different ecosystems. And one of the hot topics nowadays is AI. So I was looking into AI agents and investigating, and also looking into the MCP protocol. And then I started thinking about and investigating more of what happens if you connect to the MCP server, but you instruct the agent to do a long running task. It's like, well, keep an eye on this, but don't do anything unless you find a product I want to buy. But at that point, the user is already gone. They're not present anymore. So you can't do the classical step up where you do a new authentication code flow. So I was like, we need a way to capture it's called user intent, or the user's mandate, upfront. That's how the whole story started.
So it's interesting because you threw in one caveat that I hadn't thought about, which is that maybe the user's not there anymore, but the software is running this long-running task, and the human's off making an espresso or something.
Exactly, or taking the flight home. I don't know.
and so, but the software is churning away on this problem.
But they're still acting on the user's behalf.
Right.
So they're not like a backend service that does things on their own. They're still in the user context.
And so, and maybe, at authentication time, the user or granted access, and an access token was minted that the agent is using. And it sounds like, you sort of hit upon this old issue that's been there for a long time, which is, how do you downscope tokens, or how do you attenuate the authorizations of a certain token so that we don't maybe we don't want to grant the subagent all the rights of the token. So you hit on that issue, and then so let me ask this sort of background. Wouldn't token exchange also be a way to solve this? Couldn't we do a token exchange for the original access token with additional context, maybe a transaction token or something?
No, I don't think so, because at that point, or token exchange, it's just like, well, give me this. I have this token, give you another one for this. And yeah, you can do downscoping and all of that. And I think that's very great, but that's not the point I have. Because when you mint the token at the beginning, you don't have to issue all the scopes that the grant represents. So the user can grant a lot of access rights, but that doesn't mean that the authorization server has to give the client all the rights. So they could mint the token that's actually his privilege. Because in my mental view, there's always a contract between the authorization server and the resource server. So the authorization server knows what it protects or what it's supposed to protect. So it knows what this privilege in the context of this resource server means, or in the context of this scope means. So it can issue a least privilege access token. But when we talk about agents and long-running applications, doesn't have to be an agent for that matter. They may do a request that requires more access rights and step up. And they in the grant, they got this, but now they need to step up. And yeah, maybe you can do a token exchange for step up as well. But my idea was that the authorization server needs more information, and it wants to convey to the authorizations to the client what kind of information you need, and that you can't do in token exchange. I mean, the protocol I designed or suggested, it works for token exchange as well. So if you want to do token exchange to scope up, and the authorization server has a policy saying, well, I can't just give you the right scope. I need to know if you really got the prompt now to do that, or if you really are supposed to do that now. So I need more information from you, and then it can send this challenge.
And that's really so. Well, I just want to comment that it's sort of interesting that I went to downscoping, and you actually reversed that and said, no, we're going to actually give you a very limited scope token, which then you're going to have to upscope, essentially. And when you say you don't want to use a token exchange, when you do a token exchange, you get a new token with a new JTI, right? A totally different token. So you're saying that you don't want to change the primary key for the token. You want to leave the JTI of the token the same, but you want to change the values of this token, or
no, not. I mean, you can still
or
do
it's still a
token
new token.
No, it can still be a new token. I'm not saying that I don't want to use token exchange. I'm just saying that the policies on the authorization servers, they can't just do the upscope. They want to have more assurance from the client. They need more information from the client to do that upscope. If that's through token exchange, or if you do another grant, doesn't really matter. But it's like the information that's in the grant is not enough to perform the request, to authorize it, to issue a new token, because we need more information. For example, and going back to where this all originated, when you have the AI use case and the MCP as it works now, where you connect an MCP server and it has all, it has all the scopes, and as a user, you just want to get connected, right? So you just grant all the scopes, and then it's connected. But when I actually prompt, it may not need all the scopes. The prompt may be something that just needs, first at the beginning, a least privilege scope, and it could even be that when I prompt, I don't even need any high privilege scope, so to say. So it really depends on what I then instruct the agent to do after it got the access token. So the instruction could be, well, just read all the data, and that's fine with this least privilege access token that I said. But if the user would say, well, also write data, then you would need to upscope. But from the authorization, the authorization server doesn't know if the user actually instructed the agent now to do a write request or not, because it's disconnected. It knows that in general, yes, it should do, but it doesn't know if it should do it at this moment. If the agent was actually instructed by the user to do a write now, or if the agent came up with that because of some logic. And I intentionally kept the draft very vague on that one, because I don't know how to convey that message in a data structure. But that's the idea, that the authorization server can then challenge the client, say, well, give me a proof that you're not supposed to do that. And I realized, well, this may not be the only use case. Or I don't want to lock it to one use case. The authorization server should be able to challenge whatever it needs. We're going to specify that at some other point in some other profile, what that challenge means. So that's why I just, the protocol itself is very vague. It just defines the messages, but not the content yet. That would be different profile.
So I'm going to ask kind of a silly question. I think you're suggesting in the spec that you use the token, that we're going to add functionality to the token endpoint.
No.
No?
New endpoint? To the token response.
You want to add a new endpoint?
No, I suggest to, I suggest to add it to the token response.
My question. So, sorry. As a vendor, also in the space of an OAuth product, there's a lot of business logic in the token endpoint today, and it's very complicated. The token endpoint is very complicated, and I don't love the idea of making it more complicated by introducing states. Like basically, what you're suggesting is that we introduce a state. I think you call it the challenge session state. And so I'm just worried about increasing the complexity of the token endpoint. Maybe I'm incorrect about that.
No, I think that's a fair point, and that's why I also brought the suggestion to the working group to discuss that kind of challenges. And I didn't receive much feedback yet, but it could be that the conclusion then as well, it's better to put it on a different endpoint. But on the other hand, the beauty of having it on the token response is that you can apply to any grant. You can have it on token exchange. You can have it on token refresh. You can have it on par even if you want to. So you can have that challenge whenever you need to. I like to think of it like MFA for clients. So the client needs to present more information about itself, about its request, so that the authorization server has more confidence and can authorize the request. And that wouldn't work with a separate token and separate endpoint.
So you're basically suggesting that we make the token endpoint stateful.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that, but yeah, I think that's a consequence. I'm not sure if it works stateless. Maybe you can make it stateless as well.
Just to play devil's advocate, my take on this, and when you go to the OAuth workshop, you'll get the actual author's take on this. But my understanding was that one of the design goals of the token endpoint is that it is not stateful. That there's we're going to handle the stateful stuff with the authorization endpoint, where you'll have this interactive, flow of and then so I don't know. I think that will probably be met with some skepticism, but we'll see.
Maybe you can design it in a stateless way as well. I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet. I got inspired by other similar protocols, like the first party application.
Yeah.
for first-party application. That one, it's pretty similar, but it's for user authentication. So that's where I got inspired, but that doesn't mean that it needs to be in the same way. So this draft is still in 0.0 version. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's an idea that I wanted to put out there. It's not like finished. I now realize, yeah, it's stateful. That may not be good, may not be desirable. Then we need to find another way. But it's also a way to get started the discussion that that you need to challenge the client for more information, because there may be, a risk signal somewhere that indicates that something's suspicious with the client. So you may want to get a fresh attestation, for example, or things like that.
You mentioned the native authentication, first-party native authentication. I forget what they're calling it now. I feel like it's had several names. But and that's a really cool spec that got massive adoption. Like I think even the 0.0 draft got a lot of adoption. Like, I guess you guys support it. Keycloak supports it. Janssen Project supports it. It was just like, I know Okta supported it because they wrote the spec. But one difference, I actually had a conversation about that, perhaps with Aaron Parecki, or maybe Dick Hart, I forget who. And I said, so this is a new endpoint, the authorization challenge endpoint. And the response was, not necessarily. Like, you could, you could do it as an endpoint, or your .well known for that endpoint could refer just to your authorized endpoint if you choose to update your authorized endpoint. So they architected it in a way where they said, here's a distinct piece of functionality. And if you're crazy enough to actually want to integrate this into the authorized endpoint, which is also a big, very, functional endpoint with lots of complexity, then go for it. But you might just want to keep it separate. So maybe that approach might make sense. That's not really a question. That's more like a comment. But let me ask an actual question. So now you've introduced this state parameter, right? So you need to say stuff is happening. We want you to return. You're going to do stuff on your side, client, to give me more proof, and you're going to present back this state. That I'll be able to look up your state and figure out, like, where we left off. How do you protect that from replay? Because as soon as you introduce a state parameter like that, you have to worry about an attacker stealing it, and then you not being able to tell that it's stolen and basically picking up for that session and doing stuff on the wrong assumptions. So what's the protection from replay?
I think sender constraint would help there. And I think that it probably depends also on the challenge type and the risk associated with it, if and what a replay attack would mean. But you would use common other it's called mechanisms that you use, sender constraint and clock skews, nonces, things like that.
Yeah.
GTI.
Well, sender constrained tokens in particular. I think we're basically saying that we always need sender constrained tokens.
Yeah, it's a good thing, but it also adds a lot of complexity and key management. But I think in this scenario, it makes sense. It's just like a one thing, and it's not something that should travel through intermediaries, like an access token would or sometimes does. So I think this is maybe easier.
I have another crazy thought on this, but why don't you just deny the request, but maybe provide information and say, so instead of saying, here's your session, why don't you just say denied, but here's some diagnostics or some more information that might help you make a better request?
That could work as well. You could signal back something like retry, but provide this kind of information in your next request. But then it would be hard to make a flow out of it, I think. So if you're like, well, I need I need more artifacts from you, more input.
Yeah.
That could be hard with this kind of flow.
So this spec imagines some type of client proofs. And when would the authorization server demand a fresh client proof?
I think the way I picture it, probably based on signals. So like a threat detection system somewhere that tells the identity server that this client application is somehow suspicious, or that the user or that it's behaving weird for just this user in this session could be something, but it really depends on what you want to do with the authorization server. It could also just be, well, give me some kind of proof for this payment request, for example. You could do that either on the research server, but you could also already do that on the authorization server through scopes and RAR and whatnot.
So are we sort of moving into the direction of like continuous client authorization, would you say? Where we used to just say, here's your token, but now in a way we're saying, oh, I have a relationship with this client out there and I have a way to track it across grants.
Yeah, that's definitely how I picture it. I'd say. So we traditionally focus a lot on the user, but with applications being more independent and more like dynamic, and even for static applications, I think it makes sense to have this. Like, well, tell me that you didn't change, tell me that you weren't hacked, tell me what's going on your side, so that I know if everything is still okay. So yeah, I think that's a good point.
We had an interesting discussion. I had Carl McInnes on, and we were talking about how client ID it doesn't always mean one piece of software anymore. So a client ID might be or a token might be used by a whole suite of software. So for example, my agent might get a token and then pass it off to sub-agents that then make calls and such. And so what is the client identifier really represent? And do we need sort of a new, better, more granular way to better understand how the software is really using this? Is client identifier, like where does it fit in that sort of scope of identifiers for the software?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I agree that it doesn't represent an application anymore. I think it depends how you model the whole access token. I mean, the access token, if the access token contains a client ID, it could mean that this request or that the token was issued for this client ID, which means that this client was who started the whole process, and that may be good enough. I mean, we have all these machines call machines in the context of a user. We already had that had that for a very long time with microservices, right? So this is not really something new. What's a bit new, and that's once again triggered my draft, was that we don't know if what the second or what the agent does is really what it was supposed to do, what it was instructed to do. Because before we could be fairly sure that we know the functions and what this piece of software is capable of doing. But now with agents, it's not it's not easy to know anymore what's going to happen and what they can do. So that's going to change. But I think the identity part, it's not that much different from what we already have in complex systems. But I know that not everybody agrees with that more thinking.
Yeah, we had a guest, Sarah Caccetti, from Semperis, and I don't know if you've seen her work. She built this agent called Claudry Hepburn.
I'm afraid I
It's
haven't.
it's a OpenClaw agent,
Mm.
and um, and so um, so the Claudry Hepburn, the agent, might get a token, and then spawn subagents. And the way that Sarah implemented it is she created a Spiffy-like server in the agent, so that every time Claudry spawns a subagent, it spawns a specific identifier for that. So you sort of have the a cascade or all of this software running around this core software that maybe that the human has a relationship with. Like the agent is like the new browser in a way. It's the new user agent. And
Exactly. Yeah, it's a new user agent. But the question then is do you really need all those identities? Do you really need to know that was a sub agent when you get to the API request? Because that's where I'm interested in. I'm not interested in like the tools and whether the agent can read a file. That's not my area. I'm within OAuth, and that means API access.
right,
So if you have all these sub agents and you have all this information, the access token, my question is, can the API like operate on that data? I mean, what does this Spiffy ID tell the API? Can it have policies that would somehow like consider this ephemeral ID? Or can it just, and if it can't, why do we have it? And the only argument I come up with is for traceability. And that's totally fine, but that's not for authorization. So if we talk about authorization, I don't think that all this delegation necessarily matters. It's maybe who is the user, who is the client, that's the first agent, and what are they supposed to do? Should I allow this request or not? It could be that there is a policy saying, well, I don't accept if that traveled for too many sub-agents because that seems a bit weird. That could be, a policy on the API level, but I don't think that on the API level that you necessarily care about all those different agent IDs.
right. I guess with my governance hat on, I want to know all the humans, all the software, all the business units and third parties that are involved in this transaction, so I can hold the right parties accountable. So the traceability is important to me when things go wrong. If things go right, you don't care, but when things go wrong, then that traceability is key for accountability and understanding that we have not only this one piece of software sort of that's calling that maybe has running in the web browser and has the ability to call the APIs, but that to understand the rest of that software stack so I can maybe figure out, well, this subagent made this error and maybe I need to update this model because of it. And so I see the understanding all of the identities in this transaction, but maybe your policies. We chatted a little bit about policies. What do you see the direction of travel as for policy management? Because you're expressing a lot of complex policies. When might you want to do this extra interaction, or under what circumstances might you actually issue this claim in this token or upscope a token? What's your thoughts on how are we going to make this easier for developers and implementers and make it more scalable?
Oh, that's a good one.
We're
I mean,
digressing a little bit from the challenge protocol, but I'm just curious.
yeah, no, but it kind of ties into it. I mean, everything is more dynamic, so you need policies that allow you to like provide dynamic answers on dynamic input. I'm not saying that the policy is dynamic because they are fairly static, right? They say, well, if this happens, then do that, and if that happens, then do that. But the input and the outcome is different, and you may want to have similar or same policies on different ends. And then I think it makes sense to have a central policy management and use one of those policy engines and push out the policies so that you can be sure, well, this is the source of truth. Because if you have to go into all these tools, it becomes hard to audit as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess we have a thread of authorization stuff on this channel. So to see the other authorization conversations, it's not an easy or solved question. And there's a new standard called AuthZen. Is Curity supporting AuthZen, the evaluation API?
We do, yeah. You can call AuthZen as part of issuing scopes. So you can, the security identity server can call an AuthZen and check if it should issue that scope to the client or to the access token.
Does it have an AuthZen endpoint in Identity
No,
Server?
no, we don't have that yet.
Yeah. I actually had another question about going back to the protocol. Do you see this interactive authentication flow as being more useful for public clients or private clients? Or could we use this approach for for browser-based clients with where they can't protect secrets?
Oh, that's a good one. Since we were talking about sender constraint, like artifacts could be hard to get that to work with browsers. On the other hand, browsers are, I'm not that familiar with all the browser APIs, so that could be technically a browser API, and you could have bearer tokens as well. Maybe could work technically, I think. Say, well, I get the fresh artifact from my browser, and that may be good enough to just looking at the freshness and the nonce, saying, well, I'm confident enough that you haven't stored that somehow.
Right. So if we have, so I think what you're saying is that it's hard to do sender constrained tokens with public clients because you can't protect the private key. And so you'd have to find another strategy to figure out to protect against replay attacks. If this session, what do you call it? The challenge session is stolen, to prevent it from being replayed. Okay. Well, I think I kind of understand what you're getting at here. I think you didn't get a lot of feedback on the list, which is not atypical in my opinion. So especially today, there are so many more drafts. I don't know if you've noticed how many drafts there are, but there's a lot.
I did the math the other day. I think it was at least one a day. So it's really hard to keep track and resonate and discuss all of them.
Right. And a lot of them are new ways that agents can either register or identify. This spec, I think, is a little different because it's a really fundamentally would change OAuth spec. So to me, it seemed like not just like, oh, we're going to introduce a new way that agents can authenticate or get claims or delegation. It does seem, I don't know. I think it's going to be an uphill battle on this one.
We'll see.
I think actually, it goes along with why the whole software identity stack, I think, is changing here. And we're seeing the agent will become a first-class identity. There's been sort of a move towards attestation-based identity and away from dynamic client registration or presenting attestation during client registration. We've been hearing about that for years. But I think there's really so many questions right now in the sort of identity and how we're going to better identify software, that I think this idea is going to probably receive a lot of friction because they'll be like, well, we thought we had that part at least solved. and we
And it
want to
turns out
move
you
on
don't.
to new stuff and not like sort of, add new features to this very stable sort of, although it's not like that there's not new OAuth stuff happening, but I don't see a lot of OAuth stuff that actually impacts the core like existing endpoints. And you're suggesting a new type of response or a new into from all potential grants.
Mm.
So do you know of any other specs that are like that, where they're not talking about something incremental, but they're talking about, or this is incremental, but incremental to the core existing endpoints versus?
That's a good question. No, I don't think so. I'm not aware of any,
Yeah.
actually. All of them introduce new endpoints if they want to introduce something new.
Yeah, and we can just look at the OAuth work group later and do a mental sort of math and see. Yeah, it is a different kind of spec. So I mean, um, well, hopefully you'll make it to the OAuth group after the next one and make your case in person, because I definitely think that's what it's going to take. Um, and you also figure out, I don't know, and see, really push the community more and try and get specific
Mm.
feedback from people and ask them to comment on it. um, but cool. Let me give you last thoughts, and anything else you want to say before we break?
No, the only thing I want to ask is that if there is anyone out there have a read on the draft and give feedback, let's continue the discussion on the mailing list. That would be awesome.
Right, and that's perfect, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this episode, to shed some light on it, because it is hard to like see every spec that's coming. And I would like to see what the conversation is on this one. So just reminding everybody, uh, OAuth Client Challenge Protocol. We have a wiki page for every episode. It's glue.co/IOH- the episode number. So this is episode 204. So there's a link to the draft there. I'll also publish my takeaways there. The next episode, this one I've had in the works for a really long time. Neda Askandari, she's an expert in the identity in the biometric space. Biometric is this whole other parallel industry, and so Neda is an expert. I believe she's a PhD, so she's going to be a great guest tonight. It took me a long time to schedule this one, so looking forward to that. I guess next Tuesday. One last quick reminder, follow the live stream. That helps us. One day we're going to get to 3,000 followers, one at a time. So please hit follow. With that, I'll say, Judith, thank you so much for being on. It was great having you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And say hello to all our friends at Curity from Glue and Janssen Project.
I will. Thanks.
Okay, and we'll see you next time, audience.